What's up, Andy? This is Al. This is Coach's Eye. So this is something I do for my clients, especially in the beginning of kind of working with you, just because this is a way for me to show you what I'm seeing, and rather than me writing a whole paragraph of what needs to be done and what, pretty much what specific exercises I'm giving you, to show you that I'm not just cookie cutter programming, copy paste 531 or any kind of cube method or anything like that, or use the TSA program, which is funny because I know you're a prior client of theirs. Again, this is Coach's Eye. This is just going to be a nice, easy way for me to show you what I'm thinking. And again, I do want to say thank you for choosing me as your coach. There are plenty of choices out there, but you picked me, so that definitely warms my heart. And I will do my best because your PRs are my PRs. And again, if you look good, then I look good. And at the end of the day, that's what's really important, is me looking good. So let's look at your squat. So your squat, first thing I notice, let's go and rewind it here, is your walkout. Let's see. So you go 1, 2, 3, and then some shifting. I mean, ideally we want to be stepping out like kind of like a 1, 2, and then maybe adjust that one for the third one. Nothing specific, but and so that's going to be easier than if we were to walk out so many times, so many steps, because once we start squatting 500 plus, it's going to make a difference with every step. It's going to feel like it's like a ton of weight on your back, and it's wasted effort and energy. So we want to be really efficient with our walkouts. So that's very nuanced, I know, but it does make a difference. So try to minimize your shifting and try to do like a 1-2 step and then fix that third step rather than the actual big step there. So let's look at your squat. You squat low bar and flats. So from this angle, looks pretty good. Not too bad at all. No significant knee caving in, no hip rising as fast. There is some, and I'll explain it in the next video. But that was a pretty good squat. So let's look at your side video. This kind of shows me a whole lot more what's going on. Boom. And so this is going to be for reps. This looks like it's about, I don't know, 85% of your max probably. You bust out 3. You probably had, you had more in you for sure. So yeah, I would say 85, 80. But with that being said, let's look at your bar path. So I'm going to draw a straight line here from the bar. So right here is where the center of your bar, and going down to your midfoot. And so let's follow your bar path. And you can see it goes forward, then goes back. Typically people worry about that because it's like, oh no, like my bar path isn't efficient, it's not a straight line. But the thing is, your ass has mass. So for you at this weight, it's not going to be straight. Even if I were to, I have pretty good bar path, but if I were to lift, like 200, 300 pounds, I'm going to go forward like that. So just because when you're down here in that bottom position, like I said, your ass has mass. So in order for you not to fall, um, not to fall backwards, the weight has to go forward because, again, you're basically counterbalancing your butt. But there's going to be a threshold where the bar path is going to be a little bit more up and down once we start reaching about 2 times your body weight. So if you're like roughly 200 pounds, then we should expect about 400 plus to be a little bit more up and down motion. That's something that would be interesting to see once we get there, once you start to send me videos of you squatting 400. But from what I'm seeing, okay, let's go ahead and rewind it. So here's your last rep. There is some like hip shift going on. Hip shift as in not hip shift, but hip rise. So if we were to track your hip path and your knee path, then let me go and pause this video and make a bunch of dots. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I traced out your bar path. The descending one here is in blue, and that blue dot in right here is your quarter squat knee position, and then your green is your ascending hip path, with the green dot being your quarter squat ascending knee position there. So the reason why that's going to be relevant is because let's go ahead and play this in super slow-mo. So the blue going down, and then your hips go back and your knee goes back. And so what that basically is telling me is that you're trying to shift all your all that work into your hips, because your hips are strong relatively to your quads. So the thing is, so if you like physics, there is a thing called moment arm, right? So the moment arm is basically the perpendicular distance between the axis of rotation and the line of force. So with that being said, your the axis, or let's not draw the box. Let's draw this straight line. So the red straight line right down is well, let's go and draw better than that. That's going to be your force, right? The weight of the bar is pushing straight down, and then so these little um, that knee is going to be your axis of rotation. So that's going to be your knee extensor demands, and then your hip is going to be the axis of rotation for your hip, and that's going to be your hip extensor demand. So all that being said is just what is longer than, let's go and draw this in, let's say, a better color of, let's go white. So right here, let's draw that better, and here. So as you can see, you like shifting your hips back in order to get more of that work. You're basically lessening the moment arm for your quads, and you're putting it toward your hips. So what's that all fancy physics talk saying? Is basically your quads are lazy and or weak, and your hips are trying to take over that movement. That's why you see a lot of like stripper squats in order to get that going, in order to um, get you to lift that weight up. And so the reason why I put these points here for your knee in that quarter squat position, because descending is no problem. Usually it's not a strength issue. It's going to be, if your knee doesn't travel forward, it's going to be a mobility issue. But the moment you start to stand up, you can see that your knee kind of travels backwards. So that's telling me it's not a mobility issue. It's not that your ankles are tight. They probably are, but the reason why your knees are not traveling forward during the ascent of the squat is because your hips are stronger and you're trying to shift that work, and so your quads need work. So long story short, we need to get your quad stronger, and without you cheating. The first thing comes to mind for one of my favorite ones is the zombie squat. The reason why this is going to be important is because when we do a front squat, we're going to basically, let's go into a front squat. Let's say this is your front squat here. And so what that does is that in order for you to, the bar position kind of dictates your torso position. Torso position will dictate where your knees are going to be. Your knees are going to basically jet forward because you're going to be more upright in order to have that bar directly over your midfoot, because it's in the front rack position. When your knees are more forward, then of course we're increasing that moment arm, or let's do this, that perpendicular distance between your knees and your line of force, basically, right? So we all know that front squats basically hammer the crap out of your quads, but people do this differently, and people will cheat, including me, is that we can hold on to the front bar into the front rack, and basically kind of we'll be able to kind of have this really big lean, right? We lean over like so. And then what we can do is kind of hold on to the bar, and then kind of we basically will still do the same bad habit of shifting our hips back in order for us to utilize more hip power. But if we do a zombie squat, which I think I've given Devin some zombie squats, so he'll let you know how awful and awesome they are at the same time. But yeah, it's definitely going to blow up your quads and make your quads stronger, because if you were to try to shift your hips backwards, you're basically going to dump the bar on the floor and you look like a noob. You basically kind of embarrass yourself and your whole family. So definitely don't let yourself kind of shift forward, and it's basically a way to uh, prevent cheating. So and that's a great thing for me, because I know my weaknesses and my limitations being an online coach is because I'm not there with you to give that instant feedback. But I think I talked to you about kind of getting that delayed feedback. But zombie squats are going to give you that instant feedback without me having to be there. So we're really going to hammer your quads and get some nice deep squats. That would be the time to wear your Oli shoes. So Oli zombie squats would be my kind of your very first accessory. Not accessory, it's going to actually be your main lift and main focus for your first block here. So let's go ahead and I think other than that, I think your squat's pretty good. We just need to let your quads catch up to your hips. So here's your bench press now. Let's talk about your bench press. This is your competition bench, and you like to go a little wide. That's okay. All right. So from what I'm seeing is that, yes, so being wide, it's going to So the amount of arch that you have is going to dictate how wide you grip. So since you have a fairly good arch, then you're able to grip wider, because what's going to happen is that if you don't have a wide bench press, then your arm angle, let's say your arm's going to go even further down and then go up, right? That's going to be really disadvantageous for your chest muscles, because you're getting that maximum stretch, and usually a muscle is going to be able to contract when it's at a nice resting length position. So you could think of it as a bicep curl. You're going to be strongest and can produce the most force when your curl is in mid rep, compared to if it was all the way stretched out at the bottom of your next to your side of your leg. And then vice versa. If you were able to curl that dumbbell all the way up to your shoulder, you're going to be really weak when it comes to trying to touch that dumbbell to your shoulder, because that is where that muscle is in a very contracted state. And so this is going to be all relevant to you later. I can go ahead and draw should I go geeky on you? I don't know how much of a client you are, where you want to just be told what to do, or you like to know the reasoning. At least from working with you so far, you've been asking me a couple questions, so maybe you like the reasoning. So let's go ahead and do a nice little graph here. So here is the length tension relationship. So what I have here is basically this further port right here is the amount. Oh, so okay. So the x-axis being, let's go with the amount of stretch you have. So the amount of stretch you have. So this very first one right here is minimal stretch, right? And then this further end is the maximal stretch. And then the y-axis is going to be how much force you're producing. So this is your muscle and it's relationship to length. So at the shorter side, kind of like what I said, it's going to be at the top of that bicep curl, and then this end side is going to be the stretch position, where it's going to be near your leg. And so you're going to produce the amount of force, the greatest amount of force in the mid length right here. So if we were to not arch a lot, then we're going to get a lot of stretch, and the amount of force you can produce is going to be at the lower end, because it's going to be right here being really stretched out. So we want to be able to go here safely, and being able to take advantage of the weakest spot of your bench press. So all that's just fancy words for, I think it would be best to increase your arch, because I can see that you do have some kind of uh, going back toward the floor. I want your upper arm basically parallel to the floor, because then we know that it's going to be a nice resting length for your chest muscles. But with the side angles and the basically your bar path here, I can tell that your lagging muscle is your chest, because your strength is there, but the thing is, it's not fully, your elbows aren't fully underneath your wrists, And so that's telling me you want to minimize the amount of moment arm between your shoulder and basically and your wrist. Does that make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. You're basically trying to do a tucked bench press rather than a flared bench press, because you having relatively stronger triceps than your chest is what I'm getting from your form here. And let's go ahead and move on to the side position because I'll show it better. So, let's see. So let's go and let this play. So first things first, the first thing I notice here is your bar path. You kind of do a kind of just like a straight back and forth bar path. Now, everyone, typically novice, there's actually research on this. I can send you that research if you're interested, that shows that the most elite benchers are going to have basically this kind of bar path that has this kind of motion. So that this one's going downwards in that motion, and then it has this kind of J pattern going up. It goes back and then up. So you're probably saying to yourself, why is that efficient when it's not physics, where it's going to be the least amount of work is from point A to point B going the straight line. Well, you have to know that physics is going to be a little bit different than biomechanics when it comes to the bench press, because the bench press, we can utilize our pressing, our kind of our muscles that help us kind of do this overhead press, and we can utilize that in order to get some motion going upwards, because there's going to be leakage. I don't know if you are familiar with Sakatoa. Sakatoa is basically cosine, sine, and basically if I am um, okay, so if I'm pressing up like this, then of course we can break it down to having this upward force and then also this perpendicular force going straight up. So even though we're pushing this way, there's going to be leakage of energy going that way. So that's why having a nice bench press where you're able to, oh, sorry, hold on. All right, sorry about that. Pause the video because I keep getting interrupted, but that's the family life of a dad. So, what was I saying? I was basically saying that it's different from physics because a basically as it is more work. Basically, if you have force times distance equals work, that's basically going to be higher because you aren't going in a straight line. But there's a difference between work and the amount of force that you can produce. So force that you can produce is what we want, because one rep max is what we want. We're going after. The amount of work is going to be important when it starts to become more of a endurance thing, because the limiting factor is going to be how much energy you have. If you spend too much work or energy, force times distance, then you're going to burn out quicker. But we don't care about that. We want to basically lift a lot of weight, because weight, the more weight we lift, the more muscles we have, the more muscles we have, the more girls we get, the more girls we have, the more money, the more power, and then basically happy life, happy wives, or I think that's the saying. Anyways, but I shouldn't say that, because I know you have a girlfriend or wife, and if you're listening, hello. This is just us trying to get stronger. Plus, no one really cares. No girl really cares about how much you lift. I mean, I'm with my high school sweetheart, and when I first started lifting, my max was 65 pounds, and that was like when I was like, 20 years old or something. So it's pretty bad. Anyways. Long story short, we will continue to hammer to the chest. What we want to do, for the first thing that we can start incorporating is your bar path. So you can see here that we want back and then up. And so the bar path that you kind of do is just straight back and up. So it's just like a diagonal. So what happens is that when we do this back then up bar path, so the back part is going to utilize your chest strength, because you are putting your chest in a um, biomechanically efficient and optimal position in order for you to press up in. So then you can really create this horizontal force going up more vertical. Hopefully that makes sense. You're kind of using this kind of potential and kinetic energy into a way you can leak force into going forward. Sorry, man, I'm trying to make it simple and I'm probably failing. So, long story short, that's what we want. And the best way to get stronger and achieving that bar path is just to be cognizant of it. So we want to go back, then up, and then not only are we cueing that, that's going to be your number one cue is to really push toward your face once you start pressing. But I want to give you floor wide elbows flared, um, off the floor bench press. So floor presses, but you want to really emphasize having kind of a flared position because if I were to look at a bird's eye view, so here's your head, here's your legs, and here's your arm, while you're bench pressing on the floor, I should have you basically like this. I don't want you coming down like this at all, where your arms are going to your elbows are going to be pointing kind of like a diagonal downwards. I want your elbows to be pointing to the side of you, basically. So hopefully that makes sense. That's going to be your accessory, not accessory again. These are all going to be your main lifts for a while to really hammer out your weaknesses and then build that foundation. So then we can, once we start choosing a comp or start getting stronger, we can really let it shine and let your chest be more of a stronger factor and not a limiting factor. So let's move on to your deadlift. Your deadlift looks good except the starting position. That's why you hitch. So that's the number one thing that I'm seeing here. You have speed off the floor, and that's why it's a shame because with just a technique here, if I were to teach you the technique without changing any of your strength, I can get you a good 20 pounds. I can make this lift all white lights because let's go ahead and look at it and break it down. So here's your initial pull right here. And so I can really tell that you're rounded off, and then I'll show you in other videos because this one is hard to see, but you're definitely rounded off here to begin with. Excuse me. And so, because you want to have your hips high, you like having kind of a higher hip. And then what does that tell me? That tells me that most likely your squat weakness is going to travel to your deadlift weakness. And so your squat weakness was what? Your weak quads. And so if you have weak quads doing the conventional, you're going to want a higher hip because again, you're limiting that moment arm between your your knee extensors and pushing it more toward your hip in order to have your hips kind of do the brunt of the work. And so you're basically sacrificing your optimal position here in order for you to get into your current optimal position of having that higher hip position. Hopefully that makes sense. So then what happens is that once you're here, then you've already locked out your quads. Your quads aren't going to contribute any more to this pull, and then it's all going to be your hips and low back. Your low back is probably going to be a good brunt of it because your hips are pretty much it's already close to locking out here. And so what happens right here is that now you're like, oh no, I can't get any more up. I'm really struggling to get my hips and my back because my back has to pretty much lift whatever, how much this is, like 450-ish or pounds. Your low back has to do all the lifting. How about I do a little hitch where I'm going to push your knees forward in order to get your quads back into the game and then let your low back rest, and you're basically letting your low back rest and kind of reposition itself while you're resting your bar on your thighs and letting your quads do some work, and then that's why you're able to lock out after you ramp it up and hitch, and that's why you got called on that is because you totally hitch and you know that you hitch, and it's not a surprise that you hitch. But hopefully this what I'm saying to you is going to make sense that if we start off with your initial path of a good hip position and a back position, then we will have a better trajectory because your initial pull, how you start off is how you're going to end. So you can already see here, you're already rounding off forward. And why aren't you able? You're like, why aren't you able to have a straight back? It's because your limiting factor might be your low back strength, along with not, I mean, that's kind of like the obvious one, like, oh, I'm rounding because my low back can't stay isometrically tight in order to have a nice straight line. But what happens is that when you round, you're going to be able to you're going to be able to have a higher position because of what happens when you round. So if I round, basically my arm is going to be longer essentially because you're going to be able to reach further because you're rounding. And so you're reaching. Why are you reaching forward more? Reaching down more is because your hips are higher and you want to be in that strong position. So you're sacrificing um, you're sacrificing your end position for beginning position. So yeah, that's basically what it is. And so it's going to be hard because you probably were pulling for a long time. Excuse me. It's a lot of talking for today. I just got off the phone with another client. So anyways, uh, your your you round a lot, and that's probably how you've been pulling. It's going to be hard. It's going to be almost like two different pulls when you're trying to straighten out your back compared to pulling with a rounded back. So that's the commitment that I need from you is that if you want to continue to pull with a rounded back, then we need to address things where we're going to optimize with a rounded back. But if you know that you want to pull with a straight back, and we might have to kind of reset things a little bit lighter and try to work back from there. But that's just kind of where the decision is going to be. I'm not going to implement conventional deadlift for you for now. I'm actually going to incorporate a almost like a Romanian deadlifts, where your back is going to be straight. And the reason why that's going to be important is because you don't like being in this position here. So when we are rounding off your low back, right, that can allow your hips to be higher. And so what happens is that you don't like having your hips lower. So let's get you stronger in a lower hip position. But how do we do that? We do it with a straight back, yes. But the thing is, when you straighten out your back, you're basically going to, let's see if I can draw this correctly. So right now, your torso, your pelvis, the top of your iliac crest, fancy word for your pelvic bone, is right there. If we were to, oh, actually, let's right there, right? So that's the top of your pelvis. Now, if we were to straighten out your back, your torso would be, your pelvis would be more like that. And so what happens is that your ischial tuberosity, fancy words for your ass bone, is basically going from this, so from bent to a straight back position, you're going from um, a low, again, a low hip bone position to a higher hip bone position. And so, um, I, I'm sorry, I am like getting a little tired talking. So, what that means is that you're basically you have to bring your hip bone, your ass bone up. And so when you bring your ass bone up, your ischial tuberosity, you're going to stretch your hamstrings a lot. And so again, when it comes down to that length tension relationship, your hamstring muscle isn't strong in a stretch position. So what we need to do is train it in a stretch position. So Romanian deadlifts are going to be really specific for you because you're training that end range strength, almost like if you were to do curls and really stretch out and have that flat elbow position in order for you to train that initial stretch position in order for you to put yourself in a better advantageous position in that initial start of your deadlift. So hopefully that has helped out. I know I didn't explain that really well with the anatomy. I was trying to make it simple so then the core principles coming out, because really what I want to say is that you're trying to pull in a posterior tilt position when you should be in an anterior tilt position, but you are basically not having enough strength because you're having that basically uh, was not passive active insufficiency. Again, that's fancy words, and that's the words and that I want to use, but I know it's just going to make me sound like a douchebag. But it's like that curl, basically, in that position where you're not able to really curl that position because it's maximally contracted, and so if or I'm sorry, maximally you're maximally stretched. So again, if we train that RDLs What I want you to do actually, specifically, I never tried this with a client, but I think you would do really well with RDLs because look at you if we lower back the bar, right? It's easier to straighten out the back and then hold that position, right? And then as we hold that position, it's easier to hold that position than to actually achieve that position at the bottom of your deadlift. So that's why I'm saying RDLs are going to be great for you because once we lower the bar here, right, we're getting that stretch in the hamstring right here, keeping the back nice and straight. But the thing is, I don't want you to the transfer from RDLs to your conventional one rep max isn't going to be great because you're going to have that stretch reflex. Basically, it's easy to kind of um, get a little bit more power when we are bouncing the weights off the floor, right? Because we're able to get that stretch reflex, kind of like we're able to jump higher when we have that negative downward position and then jump. It's almost like trying to get a vertical jump from a box. If you're sitting on the box and then go straight to a jump without having a kind of negative downward movement jump, hopefully that they call it the counter jump motion. So you're dipping and then going up because you're stretching and because muscles have an elastic component to them. So we I don't want to get into that. We can go ahead and get into that later. But long story short, we are pausing right here. I want to have you pause RDL at that bottom position, feeling that stretch in your hamstrings. And we're going to pause for 3 seconds, and then we're going to come back up again. So again, we're going to come RDL, pause for 3 seconds, have that nice straight back, because we're not only are we stretching your hamstrings, but we're getting them stronger in that specific position. And this is going to be really a great thing for you because then if we are able to contribute more hamstring into your deadlift, along with more quads, because that's also your weakness, then it'll all catch up and you won't have a problem hitching anymore. I've fixed a lot of people, a lot of lifters and their hitch is because it's that initial start. Do not give up speed for that initial position because initial position, if you're patient, I know I think your favorite variation is like deadlifts and you pause right here. That's actually a mistake for you. If anything, I would have you if you want to incorporate pauses, which we probably will eventually, is I would want you to pause right here, like 1 second off, what's not 1 second, 1 inch off the floor, which I typically do that for sumo lifters, but specifically you try to get so much momentum going up here because you know that this is your hardest part of your lift is getting stuck right there. And so if we just kind of lend your speed and lend your position, it's okay that you're not fast off of the floor. As long as we know that once we're off the floor, we can totally lock it out. But the thing is, the way that you're pulling now is that you're trying to sacrifice that position in order to have enough speed, and hopefully that will lock you out because then you can let your low back kind of do most of the work at the lockout, which again, it's not a good strategy. We'll fix it. And I'm not saying rounding is the worst thing ever because a lot of people do round, but we want to get from the right place because your low back is getting a brunt of it. We need to make sure that we're getting it from our upper back and our low back. So with that being said, um, let's look at your sumo. I'm sure you just were kind of doing this for shits and giggles, but you have a pretty decent sumo, and it's surprising because I know your quad weakness is not the best, but your technique here is pretty good for sumo. The only reason you're probably not, a sumo puller is because your quads are weak, and you probably, can pull more doing conventional. But your technique is good. But what I would do is kind of bring in your grip, so then your arms are kind of just like hanging rope. It's going to be weird because your lockout is going to be kind of almost in front of your quads. It's going to feel awkward, but it's going to be okay that you'll be able to lock out, but your hands are going to be a little bit more in front of the thigh, and it's going to make it feel a little weirder. If anything, once we get your quads stronger, what I would probably think that you would do really well with is if you would open up your stance for your squat and bring in your grip for your squat. I'm sorry, your squat, your sumo. Sorry, for your sumo, and then you would actually your sumo would kind of skyrocket, at least from what I'm seeing, because your technique for your sumo is pretty good. We just need the supporting muscles, specifically your quads, to get on the same page. And then also, if we have your grip go in a little bit more, that allow you to have your hips higher. So for sumo, I have like two rules. Typically, I don't like rules because it's the principles that are behind it, but these actually they work out well, whether it's from Yuri or if it's from, was it, I am blanking out on the other sumo deadlifter's name. Um, fucking so Doctor Doctor Deadlift. Um, why can't I think of his name? But they have such opposing lifts because Yuri is straight upright torso, but then the other dude is like Willem, Kaylor Willem. Kaylor Willem has kind of a more bent over torso, but the things that they have in common are that their hips are high and their hips are as close over to the bar as much as they can be for their uh, for their build, basically. So with those two rules, they're basically optimizing the amount of how much they can pull. They both pull ridiculous amount of weights, but they're almost on the other side of the spectrum. But they are still adhering to the sumo rules. So for you, again, having your hips higher, that's good. And then if we work on your mobility to have your basically your balls over pretty much over the barbell. With that being said, let's look at your sumo. Again, if we were to get your low back straight, and then we can possibly get more of that, your upper back more rounded, that would allow you to have the same hip position here without sacrificing, strength and power. Um, so that's what I'm saying for your sumo. Again, it's going to be a lot of quad because your quads are going to be, that's going to be the main factor, is that your quads are going to, it takes a lot more quad power for sumo. Um, and so with that being said, um, I think for your sumo, we would probably, I mean, I'll figure out what a good accessory is for that one. But here, I want to show you the difference with a straight back. This is me, of course. I think I have about 550 on the bar. And so this, is my low back. It's nice and straight. But you can see here that I do like to round my back, but that's okay. It's an upper back. This is kind of an advanced move. I'm not trying to brag because, I'm awesome. I already know I'm awesome. I don't need to brag and tell you that I'm awesome. But the reason why this is an advanced move is because it's hard to do. It's hard to kind of control your pelvis and your low back and like what your upper back is doing. It's completely, you have to have really good kinesthetic awareness of if you're rounding your back on the upper back and then really keeping your low back straight. So it's kind of a skill that we need to work on and really utilize having your low back straight and then round off your upper back. So again, with sumo, if you want to go that route, we can do some accessories. But again, I think just kind of getting your quads stronger by zombie squats and then conventional doing RDLs in order to get that stretch into your hamstrings and really training that position in a straight back position is going to really help out. Those are going to be your big accessories or your big lifts for now. Hopefully this video wasn't too long. I do apologize. I do tend to over-explain myself, and sometimes I kind of blank out on specific terms that I'm trying to explain easier, and I just kind of butcher it. Sometimes I'm almost tempted to kind of just, maybe I should just talk with big fancy words and then try to maybe give definitions later on at the end of the video. But anyways, other than that, hopefully that has been helpful. I was a little bit of a stuttering Stanley. I do apologize. My family is trying to get me to eat right now, and um, uh, I will eat. But first comes first. Is getting you stronger. That's what we want. So hopefully this has made sense. I am going to send this video, and then I'm going to work on your programming again, along with all these accessories and all these specific lifts for you. I think we're gonna do whole lot well, especially with my programming as well. We're gonna really push the limits. And again, I do appreciate you choosing me as your coach, because there are plenty of people out there that will take your money really fast. And not that I won't take your money fast, but hopefully I'm delivering a good product behind it. Other than that, train hard, train smart. Let me know if you have any questions, because I'm always happy to explain myself, maybe over explain myself as well. So appreciate it, brother. Take care.